Welcome everyone to Racing Simulation 3, and let's get straight into it because after that intro I've got some explaining to do. So who were those guys? God knows, but they've all got photos in the game and various statistics about them. Does that mean it's all completely made up? Not quite. They're essentially the Formula 1 drivers from the 2000 season, but Ubisoft, who are responsible for this glorious creation, didn't have the license to make an F1 game. So they did this instead. It means that Mark Schmeiler is actually Michael Schumacher, Jack Braun is Jensen Button, and Melvin Hilkinen is Mika Hakkinen. Look, they're virtually twins. They've done the same thing with the teams too. Iconic names such as the Evolution Isuyato Power, which looks a bit like an old school McLaren, and the Galileo Ital KW, which looks nothing like a Ferrari. I'm pretty sure all those stats are correct though. The weirdest thing though is the tracks. It is the circuits from the 2000 season, so race 1 is at Albert Park, except it's no longer the Australian Grand Prix, it's now the New Zealand Grand Prix. Eh? That's really confusing. I'm guessing there must have been rights issues there too. But at least it does mean we get some cool new locations to visit for a race, such as Iceland, Greece and Liechtenstein. Is there even enough space there to build a track? In fact, there's only one circuit missing from the lineup, and it's Monaco, which probably would have been relocated to the Democratic Republic of the Congo or somewhere. But it's strange it's missing on here considering the predecessor to this game was specifically called Monaco Grand Prix Racing Simulation 2. And the final bit of weirdness before we move on to the gameplay, it's based on the 2000 F1 season, and yet the game was released on the PC in December 2002 and late 2003 on the PS2. Try and make sense of that. Well, I'm not going to, because it's time to talk about the game itself. Let's start with the things I like. The graphics aren't horrible, they're not amazing, but I've seen a lot worse. The on-screen visuals also resembled the TV broadcast from back in the day as well, which is a nice touch. Okay, stuff I don't like. Make yourself comfortable because there's a lot to get through. Let's start with the big one, the steering. This is one of the worst handling games I've ever played. It just feels like there's zero grip at every corner. Turn the analog stick a smidge too far and you're going to spin off. It's so difficult to keep your car pointing the right way. So often the back will slide out and there's not really anything you can do to save it. You just have to be careful and take it slow. But this is supposed to be a not Formula 1 game. I don't want to go slow. Unsurprisingly, it's even tougher in the rain, which is going to lead me into my next complaint. The driving school. This is a series of challenges you undertake to practice your driving. It's things like navigating certain types of corners, completing a race start, or pulling off an overtake. A similar sort of thing that you get in Gran Turismo. Every single one takes place at Suzuka, home of the Korean Grand Prix in this bonkers universe, which is a bit boring, especially as there's 16 challenges to get through. And it culminates with completing a full lap of the track, first in the dry and then in the wet. It's tricky enough doing it in the sunshine, but in the rain? With this handling model, it's an absolute nightmare. It took me well over an hour to finally get one lap together that was quick enough to pass the test. An hour! To complete what is basically the tutorial. I was not a happy bunny. And what makes this so annoying is that you have to ace every challenge in the driving school to unlock not only the championship mode, but also a single race. Now, I don't have a problem with working through a game in order to unlock new stuff, but when it's something as fundamental as the ability to do a bog standard race that's hidden away, that really is tedious. We've unlocked it now though, so let's jump into a race at Montreal or wherever this has been moved to, and see what happens. I've put the difficulty on easy because, let's be honest, I'm probably going to be spinning off at every other corner. But I wasn't expecting the AI to be this slow. This is ridiculous, they're barely moving. Mark Salvio? More like Mark Snailvio. Despite that spin off the start, I managed to make up 21 positions in half a lap to take the lead exiting the hairpin and promptly waltzed off into the distance. In fact, by the end of this 6-lap race, I'd lapped everyone. No wonder the 7 people in my team are so ecstatic. Clearly I need to up the difficulty, but I can't imagine that level of AI being a challenge for anyone. Even blind 97-year-old monks with one arm who had never heard of video games before would dominate in this situation. We're starting a championship on medium difficulty this time, and the weekend starts off with a 2-hour practice session. Do they really expect me to sit here for that long just practicing? No they don't, because it's immediately followed by practice 2, which is another 90 minutes. So that's 3.5 hours of preparation we're up to. Of course I'm skipping these. You then get an hour for qualifying. I did 1 lap to earn my spot on the back row. And then there's another 30-minute practice session before the race. So that's a grand total of 5 hours of practice and qualifying this game wanted me to do. Across a 16 race season, that would add up to 3.25 days. Just to rack up the laps and finesse the car's setup so we're incredibly well prepared for a race that lasts 5 laps. Yep, that's it. Now in fairness you can set the distances to be longer, and this is the shortest length you can do. But I do find the idea of doing all those hours of prep for a race that's over within 10 minutes quite funny. Even on medium difficulty though, the AI are really slow off the start, and it's caught me out again. But once more I'm able to catch up and rocket up the field almost instantly. I'm up to 16th by turn 1 despite the spin. It doesn't take long before I'm involved in a crash, and trying to recover I now can't see what's coming because the camera's looking at me head on, so I immediately cause another accident. And then another one. Multiple spins follow and it gets to a point where I've damaged the rear wing, and if I thought this car was difficult to drive before, it's almost impossible now. Then it gets worse when this shunt causes the whole chassis to turn red on the indicator. The pit stop doesn't fix much, and my engineer is getting very stroppy with me.
You're in 22nd position, put the boot down!
Alright, calm down mate, you try driving this thing. I somehow make it to the end, a lap down and last obviously. Clearly needed a bit more practice time. I tried a couple more races without any success. Interlagos was underwater and I ended up DNFing on lap 5. I know this looks deliberate, but I promise it wasn't. Imola went a lot better and I was somewhat competitive, but some pirouetting in the latter stages meant I had to settle for 8th, just outside the points. After 3 non-scores, my championship hopes are probably over. And of course this wants you to win the title in order to unlock the next part of the game, the scenarios. So I thought I would start again just to whiz through it in order to access those. But how do you restart the season? I've looked for ages and I cannot find any way to do so. So what, I've got to complete the year before I can have another go? I can't even restart the game and make a new profile because that would mean having to do the driving school all over again. Ah, forget it, I'm never going to unlock those scenarios. I don't think anyone ever has, to be honest, because I had a quick look around on YouTube to see if I could find any footage of it, and there's nothing. There's an overtake mode too, which is also locked and seemingly equally obscure, so yeah, no idea what happens in that either. The only other modes are a time trial, which is what you'd expect, and an arcade mode, which is also what you'd expect. Reach the checkpoints before the time runs out, try not to spin 20 bazillion times. At least those two are available from the beginning, but it's not much of an offering. So there you go, Racing Simulation 3 is, quite frankly, crap. If this was some sort of ice racing simulator then fine, they've nailed it. And I know there was less grip on F1 cars in those days, but as we've seen, this isn't F1. Sometimes bad games can be entertaining, but this one is just too frustrating to drive, too time consuming to work through, and ultimately not much fun. Thankfully, they didn't bother making a Racing Simulation 4.